Anyways, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what I had in mind. And the rest is we just kind of wing it because I don't really prepare anything else beyond a loose idea. I just kind of like to let the conversation go where it does. Welcome back to another episode of Scouting Stuff. You've got three of us today. I continue to be Scouter Ken, and I'm joined by a couple of people from Scouts Canada. Ruchi Maniktala and Heather Ferguson were actually, Scouter Mike, who has been on the podcast before, pointed me in your direction to talk about Chipmunk Scouts. And for those of you playing along at home, count how many times I erroneously refer to them as Squirrel Scouts, because I guarantee you'll get confused. But before we get into the topic of chipmunks, let's do some quick introductions. So, Ruchi, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I am Ruchi, and I'm currently working as an associate director for early years. Before this, I was working with the pilot Learn to Camp, but all this falls under new program strategy team. And now all set to work for early years Chipmunks pilot program.
Awesome. And Heather.
Hey, Ken, thanks for having us. So my name is Heather Ferguson. I'm the Director for New Program Strategy with Scouts Canada. So basically, I have Ruchi on my team, a team under her as well, working on early years, and some other staff that work on other new pilots. Basically, I look at new program strategy as basically the pilot and testing or innovation hub of the organization, where we see what new things will work, and then we kind of go from there to explore and expand.
Awesome. Well, with that in mind, like I mentioned in the intro, so I just got this email, and I guess I might have been a little bit premature in kind of enthusing about it on last week's Scouting 5, because it's not going to happen. Like, we're not going to see the introduction of chipmunks to the program in any sort of pilot capacity until, I believe, September of 2025. And there was nothing in the email to like communicate how widespread that pilot was going to be. And I'm sure I'll want to address both of those questions as we move along here. But just to kind of frame the episode, when Squirrel Scouts was announced in the UK, that one doesn't count because I'm when it was announced in the UK back in, I think, 2017, 2018, like I was really excited about it because I had at the time, my son would have been a newborn in 2017. But by the time Squirrel Scouts really came online in the UK, he would have been like right at that age, like just perfect for it. And so, it was always kind of like, because all of his sisters were in Cubs or Scouts or what have you at the time. And it's just, that'd be really cool for him to join too. Now, obviously, we didn't have the early years program yet in Canada. And then it was announced, early years itself was announced at least a couple of years ago now. Can't remember the exact timing of it, but it was just within the last little while that there was like a vote held amongst the membership for what we should name this new section that was possibly going to be coming into existence. And it seems like Chipmunks has won out as, what the section could potentially be named. And we're already seeing like little bits of branding creeping into official email communications, which is awesome. So I guess maybe let's just pick apart a little bit, talking about the early years program, now Chipmunks. What was sort of the genesis of this? Like, what really motivated Scouts Canada to start exploring this program?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit kind of about the history of where it came from and how it came about. When I joined as the director for new program strategy, it was something that a few members, of the board and some volunteers brought forward as kind of an initial way to kind of grow membership and reach kind of new streams within communities. From there, we went through a very rigorous kind of behind the scenes process of researching, the effects of early years programs on youth across the country, and really how reaching youth at a very young age really helps young people gain skills they can use for the rest of their lives. It helps with socialization. It helps with those kinds of things. And then particularly coming out of COVID, I think that we all kind of saw that need rise, correct? Like,
my gosh.
Right? Yeah, like just younger kids not really having the same level of social skills and working together and things like that. So that's kind of where the idea came about. So from there, behind the scenes, we did basically a year or so of research. We did research inside and outside of our membership as well. So we held, we ran surveys to ask both parents external to the organization and in the organization what their interest would be, what they might see a program looking like. We also did focus groups across the country in which we got together with scouting membership and kind of tried to see what their main concerns about running such a program would be, and things like that. From there, we were very lucky, Rushi and I, to actually go to the UK and see some drays in action. And I think that really brought it to life for us. And it really became,
Nice.
we can do this. And not only that, but we could see the impact of it, right? The UK, the Squirrel Scouts are 5-6 years ahead of where we are. So they have been a really great resource just in terms of what works, what doesn't, specifically for them, and how we can build our program around that. So that's kind of the history of where it came from. And then we really decided late last year that this would be a way to kind of look at, again, that piece where we're really impacting youth when they need it most. And also, having watched what's happening in the UK, seeing the value of this program and how the groups that are doing it are so healthy. They have new volunteers flowing in. They have an influx of youth, but mainly that volunteer piece. There are new and enthusiastic people coming in with new outlooks, and they're able to really, bring on new viewpoints and bring back that enthusiasm for what scouting can be and should be. And then we're seeing them stay with the organization. And so twofold, this is, again, touch on youth, but also potentially down the line, we have to be patient, but a way for us to potentially grow healthier sections and healthier groups in the long run. So I think those are some of the things as we test the program, which is where we are now, and we will be for a number of years through different testing phases. Those would be things we're looking for, right? Where it's impacting youth, but also if it is having an effect on groups being able to maintain volunteers and bring in new volunteers and things like that. Because I think we all know that's been historically it's hard. It's really hard for groups.
Yes.
From a volunteer perspective.
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk because traditionally beavers would have filled that role, although it seems more and more now like I think that kind of emerged from a time, and I'm not necessarily a fan of this, but it definitely seems to be like the social trend where it used to be the case beavers was that engine, and to be fair, my own group has actually enjoyed robust success in that regard. Many of the scouters who are still with us, many of the youth who are still with us, are, people that I brought in when they were all the kids would have been 5, right? And then a lot of their parents came and joined and stuck around. Now they're leading sections or in one case, working as an SRM now, right? Went from minimal scouting experience to working for Scouts Canada and also leading one of our sections. Hi, Corey. Done right, beavers can still be that engine for growth, but it seems more and more, and especially post-COVID now, I've really noticed that whereas before it maybe would have been Cubs or even Scouts, that all of these other things that kids can get up to, sports being a major portion of that, vying for, demanding for their time, and not only their time, but the parents' time as well. Now that seems to really be hitting at like the age 5, age 6, age 7. And I'm not a fan of that. I'm not. But it does seem to be the reality on the ground. And so, yeah, beavers as a vehicle for bringing in volunteers. not as strong. And so, yeah, you kind of got to kick the ball down a little bit and focus on the still yet younger crowd, 3-4-year-olds or 4 and 5-year-olds, because, I mean, again, run well. Like the value proposition of Scouts mostly speaks for itself. That's certainly been the case with our group. People come in and they see the kind of program we run, and they're just like, "This is cool. I want to stick around." And not only that, but they see the kind of community that exists within the group, and they're like, "Ah, this is really good. I definitely want to stick around for this." And many of them do. And so, if you can have that and really sell that early on, yeah, you're going to have a just great retention, not only of the youth but of their parents. But yeah, the trick is you have to be there to serve the youth that are interested, which, so, okay. Early Years has been in design for a couple of years. It's going to be iterated on over the next few years. But coming back to that September 25 date, what currently is going to be the shape of the program, right? It could describe like how a beaver section would typically be expected to be run. But actually, 2 questions. First, is it the case that, like, whereas in the UK they call it a squirrel dray, we're going to call it a chipmunk scurry? Is that the truth? And then secondly, what is a chipmunk scurry? Like, how is that going to be run just from a day to day? Like, if I was going to run a scurry, what could I be expecting in terms of program architecture?
Yeah, so what I would just describe it as, what we are doing now is building curriculum around 2 modalities. So we would be testing it for a volunteer-led and parent support model. So as of now, the early years, the target age group is 4 to 5. And as Heather mentioned before, promoting on social skills, creativity, and passion for outdoors. That is what we are aiming at and being tested on 2 models. In the volunteer-led model, it would be the volunteers taking a lead, like any other Scout section. They would be running the program. And in parent support model, our focus would be on family engagement, with parents actively involved with their children and volunteers helping to facilitate the process. So volunteers would be there, but not in that capacity. The parents would be leading the program. This, because it's a pilot phase, we are just testing it in 10 pilot locations all across Canada. And the curriculum that we are building behind is kind of just making sure that we are supporting the parents and volunteers to the best possible way we can. So they would get 52 weeks of program on plate. So we are working on a program we are working on a program binder that would have each session would look like. That would have all the information. It would have what activities they need to do that session, and to help them not spend their time buying the materials for those activities, we'll be giving them toolkits for 52 weeks. So all the activities that are in the program binder, they would get the stuff for that week to run the program. And this would be shipped to them all together for a year. And then, so what they need to do is pick up an activity, pick the materials, and run the program. So that is how we plan to support them to the best possible way we can. They would get the virtual support from early years team throughout the time they are running the program, and occasional support on ground from the early years team as well, in case they need help with setup or something, some other training or help they need to be done on ground as well. So that's the plan for now, but definitely our aim is to support them, because we know as of now the volunteer capacity at many groups are limited. So we want to make sure that we support the volunteers as much as we can on the back end. So they would just be there to run the program, but definitely the support that they need would be given by the earliest team.
And just for the record and the people listening at home, when I asked about chipmunk scurries, they both nodded. So I guess they are in fact being called scurries, which is hilarious to me. That's awesome.
Yeah, scurry. I think it greatly kind of talks, like, you see a bunch of kids running around like crazy, and it's a little bit of chaos.
Wonderful descriptor.
That's what makes it fun. And just to add on to what Ruchi said, like in terms of the curriculum and the program. We're very early on in that process, but Rushi and her team are working hard on creating all 52 weeks. So basically a group can pull out of their binder a week, whatever week, works for them at that time, or whatever theme they're following in those weeks. And it does have a thematic approach. And every single week is story based. So so what would happen basically is that the chipmunks would sit and hear a short story at the beginning of a session, and then they'll do an activity, craft, different stations, that kind of thing, or nature based activity based on that story, and then come back and and kind of end the day with talking about kind of how the story, how they saw it, and how the day went, and things like that. So it really gives young kids a kind of that theme to come back to at every session. So I'm really proud of the work they've done on that, and kind of making that the overall theme of the entire curriculum.
And I just want to draw out too the fact that you've both now repeated 52 weeks a few times. Like, you're planning a year-round weekly curriculum, which, I mean, I know I've lost that argument more times than I can count, but I'm really, really glad to see in the program model now that, there is sort of that emphasis on running it the whole year round. And I mean, that doesn't necessarily, it's not that a scurry is going to, be wrong if they do need to wind down for the summer, of course. But it's nice now to just see that, like, from the program design, from the get-go, that whole, you should be like, let's do this year round, is kind of baked right in. So I like that.
I think there's some value to having sessions through the summer, and sessions different times of year, and, especially at this age when kids are discovering nature. And that kind of thing. And I think that's one of the things that is really strong about this program. Again, it's a test, it's a pilot, it could change, but, it's very adaptable. You can scroll through the book and pick out, week 24 and do week 24, and then you can do week 25, or you can go do week 13, right? It that's the way that Rushi's been designing it. So there's a lot of, like, it's non-sequential. It can be, but I think that makes it really interesting and hopefully appealing to the volunteers to say, I don't have to spend another, 8 hours of planning. I have this, and also our pilot locations will be receiving some money to start up. So they'll get a little bit of money, and they'll get a kit with many, not all, but many of the pieces they need to run that 52 weeks of programming. So, awesome. So they can say, okay, this is the plan this week. I can pull out X, Y, and Z out of my, kit of goodies, and I'm good to go. I don't need to worry so much about devising this plan. And if I have questions, Rushi and her team are there to mentor them and help them through week to week as well. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how this works, not just at the chipmunk level, but if we can potentially in the future see that working on a larger scale to help our volunteers along as well.
Yeah. And one thing that was interesting too, in like how Rushi described the two models, the two modalities that you're looking at, one pure volunteer led and then one with parent support. It almost, in my brain, because I'm always looking for ways to flip one thing to another, or to connect things and haywire things a little bit. It almost seems like, because I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm assuming that if you went with like a parent support model, you'd maybe then just need like your two scouters to have the section, and then the rest is, the parents, right? Because I know with at other times when I've had close calls on ratio, it really has been the case. It's like, well, as long as I have two scouters, and then I can just make sure that everybody's parent is staying, we're good to go. So But that got me thinking is that, if you started with that model, because it is always the volunteers and finding the volunteers, that is like, not a month goes by when I'm doing those news drops where I don't see a story about some scout group somewhere in the world, Canada, US, UK, Ireland, Australia, Africa, it doesn't matter. There's always, a scout group that's like lots of youth waiting in the wings, not quite enough adults to get them all in the door. So I almost wonder, though, if starting with something like the parent support model and then moving over to like a more purely volunteer driven model as, it's almost like, the squirrels kind of gives the squirrels a chance to, they're counting at home, chipmunks, a chance to prove themselves to the parents, right? And then the parents are like, oh, this is cool. I will now volunteer. I guess that's probably the hope.
That the cool thing about it is that, because it's testing and piloting, we can adjust as much as we want to, right? We can say, hey, this is working. Let's keep going down this route. Or absolutely. I think there's a lot of really great things that could come out of kind of that parent and taught model. You're getting a guardian, a caregiver, to really actively participate with their child, and you're building your community. You're building kind of some inclusivity. You're making it accessible to some kids that perhaps need a little more help along the way. I think the one thing that we've taken into consideration and we're working really hard on is how do we make sure that our volunteers are equipped to more mentor parents than they are the actual youth. So that's kind of the caveat to that model is how do we make sure that our volunteers feel they're able to work more with adults than they are with the children one-on-one. So I know you're working hard on that.
Yeah, for what I would say is our idea behind the family-led model or the parent-taught model is we are not restricting just the parents to be with their kids. It can be any adult, and they can be grandparents, older sibling. So if they have any trusted adult, that parent would say, okay, today maybe somebody else is coming to join. If they have the written permission, they could be the adult who is. So that way, the same program would just get exposure to so many people altogether. Like maybe grandparents know what the kids are doing at the Chipmunks Scurry. So it would just broaden up the prospects of who would join with the kids. Our idea is, again, maintaining the ratio of 1:6 for inside, if it is anything inside when chipmunks are together, or 1:4 outside when they are in fields and in nature. But as you mentioned, we would be having 2 scouters and then the parents joining them. So definitely the expectation from the scouters would just be helping parents if they need, but otherwise the parents would be leading and guiding the chipmunks. So the thought behind, as you mentioned, it is because the parents would get in a habit of staying with their kids. They would probably be in the same mode when they move to beavers. Okay, we have been spending that much time and we were enjoying, so then we have more volunteers turning up into the beaver section. So that is what aim as, keeping fingers crossed that it goes as we are planning it would. But we have seen there, and that's what discussed in UK as well, that when parents come to drop their kids, they feel that, I don't have enough time to go back and come back again to pick up my kids. So they like to be there with the youth that are participating. So that is one of the reasons behind this model as well. So they would just spend time with the kids, see what chipmunks are doing in their scurries. And these program and the sessions that we had designed are so engaging that we have one after the other activity. And as Heather mentioned before, they are thematic. They have mascots. For each theme, we are working on 8 themes, making sure that we are incorporating Scouts' mission and values. And all 8 themes have 8 mascots. And now we connect the kids to those story and those mascots. So those mascots, suppose Luna the dolphin is the mascot for Global Connection. Luna would tell the story. Luna would take them to different stations, take them to the ride to different parts of the world. Or if we are just focusing on one country, Luna would take them to different stations and then end up with Luna to sit down and reflect on what they learned today. So it is also connected, each theme. So it looks like a story starts each session for within 45 minutes, we end the story, but there's a mascot who kinds of drives them. Now we'd say, okay, Luna wants to swim in the water. Who will come along and swim with Luna? And they move to a different station. So they are these kind of phrases that Luna uses to keep them connected. It's coming out really nice. So when we read about it, when we get feedback from the team, people are liking it. So hopefully volunteers would get that support from our end. And as Heather mentioned, if this works out, it can open up another way we can support the volunteers in other sections other than early years.
Nice. Are there going to be physical mascots? Like I still have Little Brown Beaver that I picked up at Scout Shop. So
yeah. So either we are looking for either hand puppets or the mascots. We are still searching for them, the ones we already have in our stories. But yes, that is what we are looking for. Awesome.
Cool. There was something I was going to ask and it slipped out of my head, but that's okay. That's right. I was just thinking, it was just sort of a throwaway comment about, how that almost puts the impetus on groups that are going to be hosting chipmunk pilots, to like really find not necessarily their oldest scouters, but this is a thing that I deal with at work all the time because like I manage, a technical support group for a cybersecurity software company. And one of the things that constantly comes up in discussions that I have about training is like, I mean, obviously I need people with great technical skills, but I need people who can people too, right? They need to actually be able to interface, be in front of the customers, talk on the fly, not just run down the software checklist, and do it in a way that is not like off-putting to said customers. So, it almost seems like, the groups that are going to be piloting this, they really need to find those scouters that are not necessarily like the oldest, but which do have significant experience, but that, can also kind of speak the loudest to the community in the scout group. And I mean, like, if it was the 59th in Edmonton, I could probably come up with like a half a dozen names of like people. Oh yeah, definitely this person. Because, and it's funny too, because that's been like, we've never had to do any kind of community visibility efforts to recruit people. You hear about, more so in the States, but sometimes here in Canada too, you hear about like a scout group will set up at like, maybe they'll go to a high school open house or a junior high open house, or they'll set up in the mall or outside, a shopping center. Be just like, hey, we're the local scout troop. Nice to meet you. Sign up today. Never had to do that for as long as any of my kids has been in the 59th, because we just got into the habit of running whatever crazy idea the Beavers came up with week to week. And a lot of those were actually really awesome ideas and a lot of fun to execute on. And then the kids would just go and tell their friends. And then the next week I have like 3 emails being like, hey, can I bring my kid to try out a couple of meetings? Like, yeah, okay, cool. And what's even more hilarious is like we had 20, I think we have 25 venturers, right? 28 at the end of last year, 3 didn't come back. 25 is already an insane number. Probably half of them I know from Beavers. Like they've just stayed with the program that long because it was just that much fun from the get-go. Because we had some really excellent people join us as volunteers. The kids themselves had some really excellent ideas. The volunteers brought some really excellent ideas to the program. And it was just, they just ran with it. And it was, it was great for the group's growth. It was great for retaining the youth. And so I'm just kind of like thinking, well, geez, if I was going to launch a Chipmunk Scurry, who would I put in charge of that? And I was like, I got a half a dozen names I know from within my group. And I wonder if maybe is that something that, you're going to really work with the groups too, to like make sure that they find like, the people who are just like, they are in the zone for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we are in the process of accepting expressions of interest. So within that, we do ask groups, do you have volunteers who are enthusiastic or able to or looking to kind of start this up, for us, it's not about quantity right now. It's really about testing it with groups that will, accept mentorship and come back and it's not a one-way conversation, right? We want their suggestions, we want feedback, we want their input so that we can continually improve and move to the next step of, okay, this year we have 10 groups that have piloted it, and now we're going to move to 20 or 30. And, looking at a place like the UK, I believe they have over 1,600 now.
16, 1,700 drays.
Yeah. And as an organization, I don't think we have a recruitment issue. There's always wait lists. There's always
for youth. For youth, there's always wait list.
Right? Absolutely. But I do think this opens up again to let's let some volunteers shine. Let's let some people who want to be champions for early years programs. I think this is also a really great opportunity for senior youth to get involved.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a lot of, venture or rover aged youth who would be amazing with this younger group. How can we get them involved? How can we get ECE students involved and different things like that? So I do think it, hopefully the hope is that it's going to kind of open up that opportunity and just reinvigorate groups, right? Get them excited. Let's get excited about something again. And some people who've been around for a long time, like let's give them a passion project that they can work on and have fun with too along the way. Like that's the end of the day. That's the point, right? To make it fun and engaging.
And, like I was saying in the preamble there, I mean, looking at what's happened in the UK with squirrels, it's been a massive driver for them. Scouting 5 news bit last week, like I say, I think it was the Dunbartonshire County, but they did their survey of their groups. And they're, I mean, like everybody else, they had the COVID membership dip, right? People didn't re-up across the course of the pandemic. But the Dunbartonshire survey, and that's like, I think they have about a dozen groups in county, if I remember the story correctly. But, they have returned not just to their pre-COVID memory levels, but to membership levels, but to like the highest membership levels they've had in probably 2 decades. And a lot of that has been, and I mean, they have retained, a lot of older youth across those 12 groups. They have 99, 100 venturer and rover aged youth. They call it explorers. That's their program name for it. But, and they've retained scouts too, and they brought on new scouts as well. But they also had huge uptake, not just of youth, but of volunteers through the Squirrel Scouts. That's been a huge driver for their growth. And, I mean, my hope is that that's going to also be the case for Scouts Canada. And I guess it really just depends on sort of what the timeline is from when we start piloting to when we go, basically nationwide.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we are taking a fair, conservative approach in terms of how we do this. So, this year, again, we're looking for 10-ish groups to pilot it. We might end up with a few more, a few less. That expression of interest form just opened. So we have until March 18th to collect those, and then we'll reach out to those groups and, really find the ones that are fully equipped and healthy and ready to take on this pilot. I then foresee in the next year, we have to share our results with our membership, with the board, do all those things so people know kind of how it's going. I would see it triple, if not more, in its second year. And third year, again, triple, if not more. And then most likely year 4, year 5 is when we would start to open it up to, whenever your group is ready. If this is something that any group would like to have, go for it. And I think that gives us the ability to, again, really take that feedback from our groups that are running it, learn from them, and really share with one another what works, what doesn't, and make sure we're building it in a healthy way as well, so that it is sustainable. And make sure it's doing what we want it to do, which is grow that community, make groups feel healthier, help with volunteer recruitment, all those pieces. So like I said, it's a longer kind of timeline overall, but if we do it conservatively and correctly, we're going to have better results at the end of the day, and it's going to be a sustainable piece of the organization kind of going forward. So that's in a nutshell, punny, the plan. Yeah.
Nice.
Had to throw that in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess, you've mentioned, so expression of interest form, is that something I could toss in the show notes, or is that just being handled internally with email?
Yeah, so the expression of interest form that we sent out on 18th of February is for the groups to understand what is their capacity. So we have a readiness checklist that the groups go through, and there are different things that they need to start a Scurry section. So if they want to be a pilot, the group that they want to pilot be one of the pilot locations, then they would be filling in this expression of interest form. Volunteers will fill this, and CK3 would approve before sending it to the earliest team. And then we would just, because we just have 10 pilot locations running for this upcoming year, September 25 to August 2026. We want to select locations that are all across Canada, like just get the feedback from different provinces rather than having or maybe 4 at one location. That might not really give us the feedback that we need, how it runs, what works, what doesn't work. So our aim is that once we have all the expression of interest forms filled in, as Heather mentioned, it's 18th of March, that is the last date, then probably we'll sit together and see what locations would be the best fit in terms of the spread. Like we could take locations and groups from different locations to check out how the program would really work. And then, as Heather mentioned, it's the feedback. So we would be collecting feedback not just at the end of the program, but during the program to check on if there's anything that we need to change in the curriculum for the upcoming sessions, or if there's any feedback or any add-ons that the volunteers would need to run this program. The family-based model is definitely new, so we would like to really be open to understand what are the needs, and in case there are any requirement, we could change them. But now, as of now, it's open to the groups to tell us whether they are equipped to start a Scurry rather than we forcing them, okay, you are the selected location and you have to run this program.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Actually, I didn't ask this before, and maybe it's too early to speak to it as well, but like I know right now, for example, running a beaver section or scouts or venturers, not that the parents of venturers typically want to stick around and hang out, but scouts to a degree, beavers to a large degree. Anybody who's there, like I do have to jump them through a little bit of paperwork, even just to have like, an adult helping out at a meeting. So, and I mean, I will be the first person to tell you that I completely understand, just given some elements of my own history, why we have those things. At the same time, I do recognize that can be a bit of a barrier to, shall we say, holding a parent's interest in, oh, do I really want to show up if I got to do all the jumps through all these hoops? It can be a bit of a barrier. I guess and I mean, again, it might be too early to speak to this, and it may be a case where it's just going to be the case that, whatever I would have to do to have a parent stand and help out at beavers, I'll have to have them do for chipmunks. But has there been any talk of like not doing away with it, but maybe streamlining it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my former life as an RM, I totally, I know what you're saying in terms of, we kind of have that 90-day window and keeping volunteers and parents engaged even throughout that onboarding process is really hard. Preaching to the choir. So, I don't have the answers. We don't have the answers right now, but we are working with our Scouts Canada safety team to make sure that we do this in a way that is safe for youth and the community and also Scouters, because that's another reason for all of those safety pieces as well. But also keeps in mind that, the purpose of the parent and taught type program is they are working solely with their child. So if you are only working with your child, are the rules different than if you're working with other children? So no answers yet, but it is a very lively and ongoing conversation that is happening right now with our safety team, with the goal of hopefully removing or lessening some of those barriers, specifically for the parents who are there simply to have that hour of time in their scurry with their youth. So that's the direction we're hoping to head in with that.
All right.
And just to add on there, so for the volunteers, for the parents, like the family taught model, there would be two scouters there already. So that kind of we have people who have all the scouting training and all the certifications that are needed, and the parents are there to help. Another thing I would like to add is for the parents, for the chipmunks, we are not having any nights away. So there's no camping or night out. So that would also take that, like parents are not joining them for any night aways. So that would kind of lower the risk of the adults being with the kids.
I was going to ask about that. Thanks for covering that. Cool. Well, my workday is still ahead of me, so I'm going to turn into a pumpkin here right away. But is there anything that we haven't covered that you really want to make sure gets said?
Yeah,
it's kind of an odd question, but
no, I think it's really important, since we have you here, is to really share kind of the timeline and what's happening next. So in terms of what's happening next, we have a few all about Chipmunks Zoom sessions coming up. So anybody's able to join. We can share those links with you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the notes. We have one on March 1st and March 7th. And there will be more coming down the line as well. So just keep an eye out for those things. And then the last date to submit the expression of interest, which we'll send to you as well for the show notes, is March 18th. And then depending on what that looks like, there will be potentially further expression of interests coming out later. But no, just note there so that everybody kind of understands the timeline. And again, note that this is a model or a test, so we are kind of modeling different ways and really just hoping to learn from it and go from there. So not a requirement. It's all opt-in for groups. Nobody needs to be doing this if they feel it's not for them right now, and really looking forward to it. I mean, the graphics are fun.
They are.
It's been kind of a joy to really get to see it start to evolve. So thank you very much for having us.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for your time and on such short notice too, because Mike literally dropped your names on me late last week. So I'm glad we found an opening in the calendar. Yes. So thank you, Ruchi. Thank you, Heather. And
thank you for having us.
And thank you out there for listening. And until next time, be prepared.